I'm just going to move on to 2015 budget and contract types. These are the approximate budgets that will be available for the 2015 funding round and the associated number of contracts that we might be able to fund using that contract. So the total available budget in the second column here, about $80 million should be available for allocation when the board look at the recommendations next May. And those numbers translate into 6 programs, 45 projects, 14 emerging researcher first grants, 13 feasibility studies, and 4 explorer grants. If you've been watching carefully, you'll know that the number of emerging researcher first grants has increased from what we used to fund, which was 10, and you'll also see that the number of feasibility studies has increased to 13. Usually, I think the average number each year has been around 7. And we've also increased the number of explorer grants that we're able to offer from the initial 3. So I'm going to now talk about each of the contract types and just give you a brief overview. I think that if you were going to apply for any of these contract types, you would need to look carefully and read very carefully the guidelines and the advice on how to apply and what is required on the application form. So programs first. The objectives of a program is to support the long-term development of a health field, and this is to fund research with strategic long-term vision. Budget's $5 million for 5 years, and the assessment process goes through 2 stages, a science assessing committee and a program assessing committee, and I'll show you a graphic for that in a couple of slides down. Programs are not funded through the health delivery investment stream, and there is a potential to fund research that's not necessarily a program through this particular budget, for example, a clinical trial. Currently, the HRC is supporting 29 active programs. There are specific requirements for a HRC director, 4 possibilities that are listed on this slide. The first one is if you are currently a program director with less than a year to run on your current contract, then you can apply for another one. If you've been a program director in the last 5 years, that also makes you eligible. If you're the first named investigator on at least 2 project grants from the HRC or equivalent begun in the last 4 years, then you can apply for a program. And lastly, if you're a named investigator, first named investigator on 1 HRC project begun in the last 2 years, that means it's a current project, and leading a team of at least 2 other first named investigators on projects from the HRC or equivalent funding body in the last 4 years. So you can build a team that would be eligible for a program grant. In addition to those requirements, program directors must put in at least 20% of their time into the program, and there are employment and residency requirements. So this graphic just shows the application assessment process for programs. The dates are opening in August, closing 15th of October. The applications are then sent for external peer review, and there is a rebuttal period at the end of February next year. The applications then go to a science assessing committee. The science assessing committee looks at the science quality, and if an application is considered fundable by the science assessing committee, then those applications will go to the program assessing committee, and their job is to look at fundability as a program. So any application that then passes that hurdle, fundable as a program, then goes to the grant approval committee, the board, and outcomes are announced about 12 months from now. I do emphasise that these are our closing dates here, but your research office does have their own closing dates. It could be up to 2 weeks before our closing date, because the research office does require a look at your application and approve the application before submitting it to the HRC. So let's move on to projects. Projects are a little bit different from programs in that they go through a 2-stage process. There's an expression of interest stage, and the top-ranked expression of interest applications are then invited back as a full application. The objective of projects is to support individuals or teams to address well-defined research questions. There's a capped budget of $1.2 million for 3 years, generally. You can submit an application for a shorter term, but in that case, the budget is prorated downwards at an average of $0.4 million per annum. You can also submit applications for a longer term. We have projects that go out to 5 years, but again, the budget is capped at $1.2 million. The average budget for the projects in the last round was $1 million. There's no limit to the number of expressions of interest that an investigator can submit. So this graphic is the same as the other one, just gives you a slightly different view. The expressions of interest open next week. So in fact, you can look at it now, it's on the gateway, but you won't be able to apply just yet. You have a month to put in your expression of interest. The results will be released 6th of October. Some of the results will come out before the 6th of October. The Science Assessing Committee for expressions of interest, they're all jammed into September. So if you're invited back to submit a full application, then you have until the 19th of November to do that. And then, as before, all the applications go out to external peer review. There is a rebuttal period available for applicants at the end of February. Then there's a Science Assessing Committee, etc., down to release of results in June 2015. Emerging Researcher First Grants. The application period is up on the top of the slide there. There's a budget for $150,000 of working expenses for a term of up to 3 years. And this excludes support for a postgraduate degree for the first named investigator. There are some modifications of the eligibility from last year. So applicants must be no more than 6 years from attaining a postgraduate degree, but we do take into account career breaks. There is a limit to the prior funding that's available for a first named investigator. This is research expenses for greater than $100,000 at the time of the assessing committee meeting. Suitability criteria have also been put into place, and you can read those in the guidelines, and those are the criteria that the assessing committee will use. In the last funding round, there were 14 contracts offered out of 43 applications for a success rate of 1 in 3. Feasibility studies. The application dates are the same as emerging research grants. Objective is to support small studies that test feasibility issues affecting a larger planned study. The larger planned study is the key to this. You must have information and include that in your application to tell us why you want to do a feasibility study and what the issues are before you can do the larger planned study. There's a budget of $150,000 for a term of around 12 months. Eligibility, this is only for public health research or clinical research. And the success rate is the last bullet point on the slide. So the application and assessment processes are listed here on this graphic. So the dates, only the emerging researcher applications go to external peer review. Feasibility studies go straight here to the Science Assessing Committee, and that meeting is in February. And the board meets and looks at the recommendations from that in April with the outcome in May. Lastly, this is the last grant type that I'll talk about, is the Explorer grant, and the application applications are available. You can enter them any time in October. The objective of the Explorer grant is to provide seed support for transformative, innovative ideas at an early stage. Budget, $150,000 for working expenses for a term of up to 2 years. There are eligibility requirements, so you must have host support and you need to apply into an investment stream. This year we offered 4 contracts out of 24 applications. Just to let you know that in the first year that we had Explorer grants, we had 116 applications. Obviously a lot of those, or most of those, were not really eligible because they didn't meet the first of those criteria. And subsequently the number of applications has decreased, and it just means that research office and applicants are knowing what is required for this particular type of support. And this graphic just shows how we're going to assess those. All the applications are checked for eligibility first, then they're assigned to a Science Assessment Committee, and the Science Assessment Committee has two questions that they must provide us with answers. Is the research transformative, and is it viable? Can it be done? And if the answer is yes to both of those questions, and the committee must be unanimous with respect to those answers, then those applications go into a random list, and we select from that random list who will be supported. And again, to give you some numbers, of the 24 applications that came in this year, 6 of those applications went into the random list, and we've offered 4 contracts. So the results will be available.